The signing of the Magna Carta was undoubtedly a crucial point in English history, but it has also gained international significance since it was first drafted. You've probably heard of the Magna Carta or Great Charter, but how much do you know about the document itself and the impact that it had on society? Keep watching as we explore the historical significance of the Magna Carta. The story of the Magna Carta starts with Henry II's youngest son, John. As John had three older brothers, the chances that he would inherit the crown or many lands was so slight that he was nicknamed Lackland. Nevertheless, John was Henry's favorite, and Henry planned to bestow his youngest son with extensive lands upon his marriage. This favoritism was a contributing factor in the rebellion of Henry's other sons. Despite friction between the brothers, for some unknown reason, John sided with his brother Richard. By the time that Henry II died in 1189, two of John's older brothers had died, and the crown went to the eldest surviving son, Richard. Richard, later called Lionheart, granted John land and a yearly income and promptly left England to embark on a crusade. However, Richard must have been aware of his brother's ambitions, as he made John promise not to enter England while he was away. John agreed, but probably secretly hoped that Richard would die while on the crusade, leaving the English crown to him. When the childless Richard announced that his successor would be his nephew Arthur, the son of his deceased brother Geoffrey, John broke his oath and returned to England in 1190, while Richard was still abroad. After reconciling with Richard, John was named the heir to the throne of England and was crowned after Richard died in 1199. After finally achieving what must have at times felt like an impossible dream, John was King of England. Unfortunately, his reign was a disaster. Under John, England lost most of its authority in France. John also quarreled with the papacy and was briefly excommunicated. In England, increased taxation to fund a military campaign in France stirred up discontent amongst the powerful barons. The English monarchs had dominated the barons since the conquest of William I in 1066. Although every subsequent monarch whose claim to the throne was challenged had made concessions to both the nobles and the clergy, there was no clear definition of the financial liabilities of the barons or the rights that they held over their subjects. As the power and prestige of the Plantagenet dynasty grew, the barons became more aware of the weakness of their position. While things were coming to a head under the rule of John, increased taxes under the reign of Richard also contributed to the ongoing discontent, as the king could finance whatever crusade or war that he wished with money taken from the barons' pockets. John did not get off to a good start with the barons, since he didn't offer any concessions to them, nor did he issue a general charter, despite having a contender to the throne in his nephew Arthur. Things went from bad to worse when John continued his campaigns in France, while promising the barons he would give the barons their rights if they remained loyal to him. Still, it wasn't long before the barons were refusing to cross the channel to support John, until he promised them their rights. All of the tension culminated in the creation of a new charter, an initial draft of which was read in 1215. As most of the documents that were issued before the charter was finalized still exist, it is clear that John was well aware of the precariousness of his position. John knew he would have to meet the majority of the barons' needs and grant the free election to ecclesiastical offices rather than assign the positions himself. The nobles themselves were leaning toward a violent open rebellion, although they were eventually tempered and convinced to negotiate by Archbishop Stephen Langton and the Earl of Pembroke, William Marshall. On June 15, 1215, the text that would lead to the draft of the Great Charter was agreed upon. Called the Articles of the Barons set out their demands. Discussions were held at Runnymede to hammer out the draft of the Magna Carta, the final version of which was agreed on June 19th. The Magna Carta contained clauses that were designed to lead to reforms in local administration and judicial practices. Still, the most critical part of the Magna Carta was that it was the first document to state the principle that the king and his government were not above the law. Its primary purpose was to prevent the monarch from exploiting his power and placing limitations on royal authority. The document put a stop to the divine and absolute rule of the king, and was the first step toward England becoming a constitutional monarchy. Yet, this document did not grant rights to the common people. The barons would gain the most from the new legislation. King John was keen to avoid civil war, and many historians still marvel at the fact that the king put his seal on the document at all. Some claim that the fact that John agreed to the demands demonstrates that he did have some inclination to govern his subjects in a reasonable way. Otherwise, he would never have effectively given his subjects the right to declare war on their king. Other historians feel that John was motivated more by his precarious political position than by a desire to govern fairly. Although the signing of the Magna Carta was a truly historic event, it did not prevent civil war. In the months after the charter was finalized, John tried to evade the provisions that had been made. Violence erupted in the First Barons' War. At first, the barons appealed to Prince Louis of France for help, promising him the English throne. After John died in 1216, the barons turned on Louis and installed John's young son, Henry, as a puppet monarch. The Magna Carta was then reissued by John's regent, William Marshal. The Magna Carta was further revised and reissued in 1217 and 1225. Today, most of the Magna Carta is incomprehensible to most modern readers, as it is written in Latin, made up of medieval legal jargon, and concerned with the minutiae of the feudal system and relations between the most powerful barons and the king. Yet, the Magna Carta has remained central to English political life and still serves as a touchstone of English liberties. Amongst its main enduring points was that no one, even the king, was above the law. Everyone had the right to a fair trial, and there were limitations on taxation without representation. These points were initially only intended to benefit the barons, not the general populace. However, over time, the principles were expanded and extended to include everyone, becoming the foundation for English law. It wasn't only the English that used the Magna Carta as a basis for future laws. In America, the Founding Fathers took inspiration from this pact that leveled the playing field of power. For the 18th century politicians striving to establish a new nation, the Magna Carta symbolized the rights of man and liberty against oppressive or unjust governance. The contents of the actual medieval document were irrelevant compared to what it stood for: the idea of protecting individual liberties. To politicians such as Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Jefferson, the Magna Carta represented a desire for liberty and the idea that the people of a nation should be protected rather than oppressed and exploited. In 1774, the First Continental Congress met to draft a Declaration of Rights and Grievances against the English king, King George III. In this document, they made reference to the Magna Carta, including the assertion of rights to liberty and property that were assured by the principles of the English Constitution, which many take to mean the Magna Carta. Another mention of the Magna Carta comes on the title page of the 1774 Journal of the Proceedings of the Continental Congress, where there is an image of 12 arms grasping a column on the base of which is written Magna Carta. Of course, much of the 13th century English document would have been irrelevant to 18th century Americans. Yet the core clauses resonate with what the early American politicians were trying to convey. The relevant main points were the protection of liberties and certain rights, like the right to a fair trial by jury, protection against excessive fines and punishments, the safeguarding of property, and the idea of no taxation without representation. Of the 63 clauses in the Magna Carta, the two that really stood out to the Founding Fathers were clauses 39 and 40. Clause 39 reads that no free man shall be seized or imprisoned, or stripped of his rights or possessions, or outlawed or exiled, or deprived of his standing in another way, nor will we proceed with force against him, or send others to do so, except by the lawful judgment of his equals or by the law of the land. Clause 40 states, to no one will we sell or to one deny or delay right or justice. Clause 39 is cited as the inspiration behind the idea that the government cannot deprive any individual of life, liberty, or property without just cause, and that legal action can only be taken against someone with the lawful judgment of his equals, which would evolve into the right to trial by a jury of peers. In addition, the phrase by the law of the land was used in all American documents until 1789, when James Madison introduced due process of law in its stead. Madison also referred to the Magna Carta's 40th clause, writing, "Justice is the end of government. It is the end of civil society. It has ever been and ever will be pursued until it be obtained, or until liberty be lost in the pursuit." Many historians argue that the idea of protection against taxation without representation comes from Clause 12 of the Magna Carta, although admittedly in a much more subtle way. Clause 12 states, "No scutage nor aid shall be imposed on our kingdom, unless by common counsel of our kingdom, except for ransoming one person, for making our eldest son a knight, and for once marrying our eldest daughter. And for these there shall not be levied more than a reasonable aid. In like manner it shall be done concerning aids from the city of London. At the time this was written, the English barons were objecting to taxes levied on them by the king to fund wars. Although the common people would have been indirectly affected, these weren't necessarily increased taxes for the general populace, despite what the stories of Robin Hood might imply. This clause also doesn't mention elected representation of the people, simply because this concept didn't exist at the time. However, the Founding Fathers were more inspired by the spirit of the document than the exact circumstances behind its creation. For them, the British Parliament encapsulated everything the 13th century barons were objecting against, and the fact that the barons stood up against their oppressive ruler served as a historical inspiration for them to do the same. How would you like to get a deeper understanding of history, impress your friends, and predict the future more accurately based on past events? If this sounds like something you might be into, then check out the brand new Captivating History Book Club by clicking the first link in the description. To learn more about the Magna Carta, check out our book, Magna Carta, a captivating guide to the history of the Great Charter and its influence on medieval England and the rest of the world. It's available as an ebook, paperback, and audiobook. Also, grab your free Mythology Bundle ebook while it's still available. All links are in the description. If you found the video captivating, please hit the like button and subscribe for more videos like this.